Hi guys, listen, so I'm working on this assignment for my college class, and I was going to talk about child and family equity in the United States. So I personally think there's a lot of things that could change in terms of that. Like school systems are, I don't want to say rigged, but they kind of are. There's not equal chances for families to get what they need, especially when it comes to a family that may need childcare, but childcare is ridiculous. Like, did you guys know that childcare actually costs more than a college tuition? I personally think that's okay. So let's back up here a minute. So if childcare is so expensive for families to get their kids in, why aren't employees getting paid more? So, for example, let's say Susie Q, her family is relatively, I don't want to say poor, but her parents cannot afford to put her in daycare, right? So instead, she has to go everywhere with her parents. They can only afford a babysitter every once in a while, right? Is that fair? No. That's very boring for the child, and that's a lot of stress for the parents. Now, Billy Bob, whose parents are wealthier, can afford daycare and do put their child in daycare. So, the employees taking care of him, what are they making? Well, for the sake of this, let's talk about, let's say they're making $15 an hour full time. So I'm not good at math, but let's do a little calculation here real quick. Google. Okay, so calculator. Just so you know, we're talking about like $15 an hour um, full time. And this employee, let's say just for the sake of a moment, yes, they do get a 1 hour lunch break. So they work 8 to 5, right? So 15 times 8 is $120 a day. So now we're going to multiply that by 10 for 2 weeks. And of course, you get 1,200. Now we're going to, okay, so what do you think? Employee A makes 120, dang, I can't talk, $1,200 per 2 weeks, right? And that's before tax, mind you. That's before tax. So for the sake of argument, let's multiply that by 0.80. So his or her take home money is less than 1,000. That's $960 to take home. Now, keep that in mind. So, can this person afford really anything? Kind of. I mean, okay, so if this were me, right? Let's say I get paid and I made $960. Okay, so I'm going to now subtract my $150 car insurance minus my $213 health insurance minus, I'm going to say $80 for gas. Um, that's just, that's an estimate. Like, please don't, comment down below saying, "Oh, well, you only have to pay less than me." Yeah, just it's an estimate, guys. So we're now at $517. Okay, so I'm going to now add. I'm going to say 200 for personal costs. And then after that, I'm left with $317. I can't even afford my own place, right? So family equity, right? So if there are families that can afford childcare, right? What if they made the costs lower? What do you think if they made childcare costs lower and made opportunities to going into school easier, right? So I had a friend tell me today that she would like to see opportunities getting into school be more equal, right? So have you ever come across an adult in your life and wondered how well they did in school? Well, for all you know, maybe that adult didn't get to go to school, maybe at least not a proper school. Maybe they were homeschooled and therefore deprived of what they could have learned in public school. Now, also, like public schools are not 100% reliable. There are times where, a public school is not going to teach what they're required to teach. For example, when I was in third grade, I had Okay, I don't mean anything disrespectfully, but I swear if I could show you a picture, I would. You know, my teacher was like an elderly teacher. She had that I don't know how to describe it without being rude. I mean, I don't mean it in a rude way, but think of it this way. You know, like she seemed like she was just ready to have the rest of, have time in, time out for herself, right? She didn't really want to be a teacher anymore. So she wasn't acting like a teacher. She was making us do everything, and they said, here, read this, and then come back, and then we're going to take a test on it, right? You do that to your high school students, not your third graders. Like, your high school students should be learning to rely on themselves a little more. But even then, like, there are students out there, no matter how old they are or what they're learning, that are going to need that help. And so I also think, like, I could go on for hours about how I think teachers need to be, teachers and not, someone just to watch your kids when they're in school. So, um, right. So my third grade teacher didn't really teach very well. So we would just go over things that like, think of it this way, right? Imagine you're in school expecting to learn something new, but your teacher winds up going over things you learned years ago, right? Teaching you your ABCs, teaching you how to add. Like, okay, this is the stuff you know. When I was in third grade, we were working on multiplying two digits by one digits, right? So basic, well, not 100% basic multiplication, but the one next step above basic multiplication. Um, okay, so here's what I'm gonna do now. I'm gonna say, let's say if healthcare, I'm sorry, wrong word. If childcare was a little cheaper, now let's say, okay, back up. At my program, it costs maybe about $400 a month per kid to keep kids in our program, and that's monthly. Think of it that way. So we do have programs where it's a learning pod, which means that um, either that it's a little bit cheaper, I guess you could say. And we do have scholarships available for families that can't 100% afford our program. But think of it this way, right? It's $400 a month approximately for the program. Now, our leadership, let's say our leader makes $21, right? And she works full time. He or she works full time. So 8 hours, that's $168 a day times 10, which we get 1680. Okay. And then I know for a fact that we get, well, I don't know if it's for a fact, but we do, like, they deduct our taxes as per usual, right? And I think it's 0.75. So that's very close to where we were before. It's 1260 left over. Now, if that were me, now let's go back. Okay, after my health insurance, I'm still above 1,000. After paying for gas, I'm at 967 minus personal needs minus car insurance. And I'm pretty sure, oh, and my phone bill. Kind of just forgot about that. And I know my phone bill is like either 101 or 102. So I'm left with 530, which is not terrible, but it's still not enough to pay rent, right? So think of it this way, right? A lot of places, especially in Alaska, because of the winters around here, and it reaching is, cold as negative 33, aside from, I don't know, like some places that reach maybe the 40s in winter. Like, don't get me wrong, like that's your guys, like if you live in a state or a country where winter is only like 40 degrees, um, that's you. Fantastic. It gets a lot colder here, and it doesn't get as warm here as it does in those states and countries. Trust me, you would laugh at us if you came to Alaska in summer and said, it's nice and cool here, and then you hear someone like me saying it's way too hot. Like, I'm wearing a spaghetti strap dress in 50-degree weather because it's warm for me, right? Perfect weather, in my opinion. So let's do it this way. So if rent, let's say, is 900 for a studio, right? A studio is 900. But I still have to pay for utilities, which let's say is another 150. Right? So we're at 1050. Okay? Now I'm going to add my expenses, and I've tallied them up, and it's about 670. So I would need to make a minimum of, so it says 1720, but I'm going to say I need to make a minimum of $2,000, right? Just so I can give myself that extra money. I'm not going to be able to afford to go on vacation unless I get, some magic what's it called? Like a bonus, right? I need to get a bonus, or I need to get really good tax returns, which I don't. My last tax return relatively low, right? But hopefully after this college course, it'll be a little better. So who do you think? Okay, so as a medical assistant, okay, I worked as a medical assistant a couple times, right? So think of it this way: I was making about $30 an hour for full time, right? So that's what, $240 a day times 10. And then there are some medical jobs that only pay like once a month, but personally, I like getting paychecks a little more continuously to help balance out my budgets. So that's 2,400, right? Which isn't terrible. Like that's actually pretty good. So if I were to minus my deductions, right? So now I have 1,730 left over. Fantastic. I love that. The problem is, though, so many jobs, like medical jobs today, are not fair. Um, there are so many like medical jobs that I have had where I either didn't qualify because I've got this health issue. Like if I have asthma, right? So if I have an asthma attack on site, I wouldn't say on site, but at work, there are jobs that'll write me up for that. Like, oh, we need you to be here, so we count on you to use your inhaler. Like, exactly. It's why I was walking away to go use it. I don't want to use it in front of my patients. Like, that's drawing attention to myself. And personally, like, if I'm using my medications in front of a patient, like, the whole point of the appointment is for the patient to tell me what's up with them and they can get the help that they're looking for. Not for me to say, oh, I'm sorry, I have asthma. I'm going to quickly use my inhaler in front of you. Like, no, personally, I think that's terrible. Unless I am, like, dying and cannot breathe, I will not be using my inhaler in front of someone. Um, for the most part, right? So, and then it's also, like, I got, in a summer 2021, I actually got terminated because they somehow found out that I was mentally disabled, right? And then I'm guessing that they had some kind of experience that prevented them from liking that, but from wanting someone like that in their clinic. But I'm not the same, like I'm not unstable. Like I've had people tell me I'm not unstable. Um, do I struggle? Like, yeah, sometimes, especially in situations like what if I just recently went through something traumatic, right? Do you think it's going to be easy for me to just jump right back in? Of course not. That's not easy for anyone. Like there are people who can hide it, but there's people that don't hide it and can't because it's hard for them to ignore their emotions. Like it really depends for me, right? So equity in terms of, employment and, pay rates and availability for things like childcare and family services are very limited. I know for a fact. Okay, so there's a place here in town called Alaska Child and Family. I personally think it's a great place. Like they actually have programs for all age groups. They have. When I was a teenager, I went to one of their groups called, like, they didn't really have much of a name, but I went to one of their main buildings, and they would have other teenagers there around my age and with a certain age range. Like everyone there was in high school, but not all of us were 17. You know what I mean? Like ninth grade through 12th grade. And so we would do activities like make candles one day. We went on, a feelings walk, literally like identifying. This kind of built our social awareness, and we were working on identifying people's emotions based on, their body language and their facial expressions. And that's good. Like that's the kind of stuff we want to have available for us. And the problem is I don't know how much it costs. So, I mean, as a teenager, it didn't really concern me, right? But as an adult, it does concern me. Like, if I need these services in the future for my future children, then by all means, I will need to know this kind of stuff. And that way I can plan for, finding my kids what they need and the right places to do that. I don't want to put my kid just anywhere, right? Like, putting my kid just anywhere seems a little bit more careless, right? I mean, personally, I would read reviews and get information and do some research before I select any location for any type of care when it comes to my kids. But, there are people who just, it's right there, so I'm going to use it, or it's really cheap, so I'm going to use it. Like, like, it's iffy if you do that. Like, yes, there are some cheap places that are cheap and provide the most excellent service, but there are also places that because they're cheap, they are terrible. There's a hospital here in town for kids and teens that isn't the best. It has terrible reviews. And if you are out there here in town, do not send your children to North Star Behavioral Hospital. That is a terrible, terrible place. I have read so many reviews, and just by reading those reviews, I can tell already that it's a bad place. I mean, some people are telling you that they starved their teenagers, that they um, put their hands on them a little too often. Like that's not like no privacy. Like, dude, like think about your teenager when you hear these things. No privacy, starvation, violence. Is that the type of things you want around your children or your teenagers? No, absolutely not. I'm in the future, I will not be putting my children there. I will not be putting my children anywhere that has negative reviews and bad reputations. Instead, I'm going to look for better resources. I'm going to make sure that my family gets what they need, and I'm pretty sure my future husband will agree with me. Um, Equity is very important, and I would like to see it start changing with the economy. The economy is what matters and is what sets up our future generations to become the new us, the new adults, and hopefully the better adults. And then if we can start by changing our economy, then we can make the world a better place for our kids and their kids to come. So comment down below, add any comments that you might, that you thought of along the way, what you think about what I said, if you agree or disagree. If I left anything out, please let me know. I tend to just without covering everything that I mentioned in the first place. But yeah, please do. And this is for an assignment. Thank you so much and have a good night.